What happens when Hollywood's most polished PR machine meets late-night television's sharpest wit? Tonight we're diving into the explosive confrontation that had everyone talking, a clash so intense it ended with security being called and a guest being escorted off set. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below with your thoughts, because this one is going to leave you speechless. The Tonight Show with Jimmy Kimmel was supposed to be just another Tuesday night taping. The audience had settled into their seats, the cameras were rolling, and Jimmy had just finished his opening monologue to thunderous applause. As he adjusted his tie and walked back to his desk, he could feel the familiar energy of a live show, that electric anticipation that made every episode special. "Our first guest tonight," Jimmy announced with his trademark grin, "is someone who's been making headlines around the world. Please welcome Meghan Markle." The audience erupted in polite applause as Meghan walked onto the stage, her entrance carefully choreographed and perfectly timed. She wore an elegant black dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, her smile radiant under the studio lights. She waved to the crowd with practiced grace, every movement calculated for maximum impact. "Meghan, welcome to the show," Jimmy said as she settled into the guest chair, crossing her legs with deliberate poise. "Thanks for having me, Jimmy. It's such a pleasure to be here." But Jimmy Kimmel hadn't built his career on softball questions and easy interviews. He was known for his ability to dig deeper, to find the story beneath the story. And tonight he had done his homework. "So let's talk about your recent projects," Jimmy began, leaning forward slightly. "You've been involved in several charitable initiatives, but there have been some questions raised about where exactly the donations are going. Can you walk us through the financial transparency of your foundation?" The question hit like a thunderbolt. Meghan's perfectly composed expression flickered for just a moment, a crack in the polished facade that trained eyes might catch. She recovered quickly, but Jimmy had seen it. "Well, Jimmy, I think it's important to focus on the positive impact we're having," she replied, her voice smooth as silk but with an edge that hadn't been there moments before. "We're changing lives, making a difference in communities that have been overlooked." "I don't doubt the good intentions," Jimmy pressed, his tone remaining conversational but his eyes sharp. "But when a charity collects millions in donations, don't you think donors deserve to know exactly how their money is being spent? Your latest tax filings show some pretty significant administrative costs." The studio audience, sensing tension, grew quieter. This wasn't the typical celebrity chat they had expected. Meghan shifted in her chair, her media training kicking into high gear. "Jimmy, I have to say I'm a bit surprised by this line of questioning," she said, her smile becoming more forced. "I came here to talk about the important work we're doing, not to be ambushed with accounting details." "Ambushed?" Jimmy raised an eyebrow, his comedian's timing perfect. "I sent these questions to your team 3 days ago. This shouldn't be a surprise." The lie hung in the air like smoke. Everyone in the room knew that celebrity interviews were carefully pre-screened, questions approved in advance, talking points agreed upon. Jimmy's deviation from the script was already making waves. "I think there's been some miscommunication with my team," Meghan said, her voice taking on a slightly sharper tone. "But let's focus on what really matters. The children we're helping, the families we're supporting." "Absolutely, let's talk about that," Jimmy agreed, pulling out a folder from his desk. "Because I've been doing some digging, and I found some interesting stories. There's a school in Uganda that your foundation claimed to have built. Beautiful photos on your website. Very inspiring. Only problem is, when reporters tried to visit this school, they couldn't find it." The color drained from Meghan's face. The studio lights suddenly felt too hot, too bright. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, the cameras capturing every micro-expression. That's completely inaccurate," she stammered, her composure finally beginning to crack. "I don't know where you're getting your information, but it's wrong." "Reuters," Jimmy said simply. "The BBC. 3 independent fact-checkers. Should I keep going? The audience was now completely silent, riveted by the unfolding drama. This was appointment television, the kind of moment that would be replayed for years to come. Jimmy, I really think we need to steer this conversation in a more positive direction, Meghan said, her PR training struggling against rising panic. This isn't what we discussed. What we discussed, Jimmy replied, his voice calm but firm, was having an honest conversation. I think the audience deserves that. Don't you? Meghan's carefully constructed mask was beginning to slip, and Jimmy could see the real person underneath the polished exterior. Years of hosting had taught him to read people, to spot the tells that revealed when someone was hiding something significant. You know what, Jimmy? Meghan said, her voice rising slightly as she leaned forward in her chair. I think you're being incredibly unfair right now. I came here as a guest on your show, and instead of treating me with basic respect, you're attacking me with these ridiculous accusations. I'm asking questions, Jimmy replied evenly, his tone never losing its conversational quality. The same questions that investigative journalists have been asking for months. If they're ridiculous, then surely you can answer them easily. The studio audience was transfixed. They had come expecting light entertainment, celebrity banter, maybe a funny story or two. Instead, they were witnessing something far more compelling, a real-time unraveling of carefully constructed narratives. Let me ask you something else, Jimmy continued, consulting his notes. Your podcast deal with Spotify, the one worth reportedly $12 million. How many episodes did you actually produce before they terminated the contract? Meghan's jaw tightened visibly. That's private business information, Jimmy. I'm not going to discuss contract details on television. 12, Jimmy answered his own question. 12 episodes for $12 million. That's $1 million per episode for a show that Spotify's CEO later called, and I quote, not meeting expectations. Meanwhile, you're asking everyday people to donate their hard-earned money to your various causes. How dare you? Meghan snapped, her composure finally cracking completely. You have no idea what kind of work goes into creating content, into building a brand, into making a difference in this world. You sit here in your comfortable studio making jokes while I'm out there actually trying to change lives. Jimmy's expression remained calm, almost sympathetic. I'm sure it is hard work, but when you're asking teachers and nurses and construction workers to donate money they can barely afford, don't you think they deserve to know that their $20 donation might be going toward administrative costs that include million-dollar contracts? You're twisting everything, Meghan said, her voice now clearly agitated. You're taking things out of context, creating a narrative that simply isn't true. This is exactly the kind of attack journalism that drove me away from England in the first place. I'm reading directly from public tax filings, Jimmy said, holding up documents. These aren't my opinions, Meghan. These are numbers that your own organization submitted to the IRS. The audience could feel the tension escalating. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others leaned forward, not wanting to miss a single word of this unprecedented confrontation. You know what your problem is, Jimmy? Meghan said, her voice taking on a cutting edge. You can't stand to see a strong woman who's built something meaningful. You're threatened by success that doesn't fit your narrow little worldview. Actually, Jimmy replied, his comedian's timing impeccable. I'm married to a strong woman who runs a successful business. The difference is, when people ask her questions about her company, she answers them instead of calling the questions an attack. The audience couldn't suppress a ripple of nervous laughter. Jimmy had found his rhythm, using humor to diffuse the tension while still pressing his point. This is unbelievable, Meghan said, shaking her head. I'm sitting here being lectured by a late-night talk show host about business ethics. Do you know what I've accomplished? Do you know what I've overcome? I know what you've claimed to accomplish, Jimmy said. But when independent investigators can't verify those claims, when schools that supposedly exist can't be found, When money that's supposed to help children seems to disappear into administrative black holes, then yes, I think questions are appropriate. Meghan stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. The sudden movement caught everyone off guard, the cameras quickly adjusting to follow her. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this," she declared, her voice echoing through the stunned studio. "This is harassment, pure and simple. You invited me here under false pretenses to ambush me with lies and conspiracy theories." "Meghan, please sit down," Jimmy said, his voice remaining calm but firm. "We're in the middle of an interview. If you can answer these questions, then answer them. If you can't, then maybe that tells us something too." "I'm not answering anything else," Meghan shot back, her hands trembling slightly with rage. "This interview is over. I'm leaving." She started to walk toward the edge of the stage, but Jimmy's voice stopped her. "Running away doesn't make the questions go away, Meghan. It just makes people wonder what you're hiding." She turned back, her eyes blazing with fury. "What am I hiding? What am I hiding?" "I'll tell you what I'm hiding, Jimmy. I'm hiding from people like you who can't stand to see someone rise above their circumstances, who can't bear to watch someone use their platform for good instead of just making cheap jokes." The confrontation had reached a boiling point, and everyone in the studio could feel it. Meghan stood at the edge of the stage, her chest rising and falling with barely controlled anger, while Jimmy remained seated behind his desk, projecting an air of calm professionalism that only seemed to infuriate her more. "You want to know what's really going on here?" Meghan said, her voice carrying across the silent studio. "This is about jealousy, plain and simple. You can't stand that I've built something meaningful while you're stuck here night after night, telling the same tired jokes to the same mindless audience." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Insulting the audience was crossing a line that even the most heated celebrity meltdowns rarely approached. Jimmy's expression hardened slightly, his protective instincts for his viewers kicking in. "I think you should be careful about insulting people who came here to support you," Jimmy said, his voice still measured but with a steel edge. "These are good people who work hard and deserve better than being called mindless." "Oh, please," Meghan scoffed, gesturing dismissively toward the audience. "They're here for entertainment, for gossip, for drama. They don't care about real issues or making a real difference. They just want to consume whatever manufactured controversy you serve them." The audience stirred uneasily, some murmuring their disapproval. Jimmy could see security personnel moving closer to the stage, though he hadn't called for them yet. "You know what I think is happening here?" Meghan continued, her voice rising to near shouting levels. "I think you're intimidated by someone who actually has substance, who actually cares about more than ratings and ad revenue. You're used to interviewing actors who just want to plug their latest movie, not someone who's trying to change the world." "Change the world with what?" Jimmy asked, his patience finally showing signs of strain. "With foundation money that can't be accounted for? With schools that don't exist? With podcasts that get canceled for not delivering content? I'm all for changing the world, Meghan, but it helps if the change is real." "Everything I do is real," she shot back, her voice cracking slightly. "Every dollar we raise goes to help people, every project we undertake makes a difference. Just because you can't see it from your ivory tower doesn't mean it's not happening." Jimmy stood up from behind his desk, his full height making him more imposing than his usual seated position suggested. "Then show us the receipts. Show us the schools. Show us the families you've helped. Show us anything concrete instead of just asking us to take your word for it." "I don't owe you anything," Meghan declared, but her voice was becoming shrill, desperate. "I don't owe this audience anything. I don't owe the media anything. I've given enough of myself to satisfy your endless appetite for drama and controversy." "You owe the people who donated money to your causes," Jimmy replied firmly. "You owe them transparency. You owe them honesty. You owe them the basic courtesy of proving that their money actually went where you said it would go." The studio had become a pressure cooker, the tension so thick it seemed to hang in the air like fog. Meghan's carefully constructed public persona had completely evaporated, replaced by someone who seemed genuinely unhinged. "This is exactly why I left England," she said, her voice breaking. "This is exactly the kind of systematic harassment that drove me away from everything I knew. People just can't leave well enough alone. You can't let someone be successful without tearing them down." "Nobody's trying to tear you down," Jimmy said, his voice softening slightly. "We're trying to understand. We're trying to get answers to legitimate questions. If you're doing good work, then showing us the good work should be easy." "I'm done," Meghan announced, turning toward the exit. "I'm done with this interview, I'm done with this show, and I'm done with people like you who think they have the right to interrogate me like I'm some kind of criminal." She started walking toward the exit, but Jimmy's voice followed her. "Meghan, walking away doesn't solve anything. It just creates more questions." She spun around one final time, her face flushed with anger, and something that looked almost like panic. "You want to know what solves things, Jimmy? Having the courage to build something instead of just sitting there criticizing what other people build. Having the vision to see beyond your own small world. Having the strength to keep going when people like you try to drag you down with their petty jealousies and small-minded attacks." With that, she strode off the stage, leaving Jimmy standing alone while the audience sat in stunned silence. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every moment of the unprecedented meltdown. Jimmy walked back to his desk, his professional composure intact despite the chaos that had just unfolded. "Well," he said to the audience, his timing perfect. "As always, that was certainly more excitement than we usually have on a Tuesday night." The audience erupted in nervous laughter, finally able to release the tension they had been holding throughout the confrontation. "When we come back," Jimmy continued, "we'll have our musical guest, and I promise you, they'll probably stick around for the whole performance." As the show cut to commercial, the audience was still buzzing with excitement, phones already coming out to capture and share what they had just witnessed. This was the kind of television moment that would be talked about for years, dissected and analyzed, replayed and remembered. So what do you think really happened here? Was this a journalist doing his job, or did Jimmy cross a line? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button because moments like these don't happen every day. And when they do, you want to be here to see them unfold.